start over. Okay. Okay, hi, my name is Katie.
And I'm Stephanie.
And we're from the Reading Nook Magic podcast, and we are very, very, very excited to be here with a panel of these amazing, talented authors. And yeah, we're just gonna start. So what we're gonna do, because we only have 2 mics, I would like to start off with just handing the mic down and everyone introduce themselves, tell us a little snippet, like your genre, who you are, like just your elevator pitch.
My name is C.L. Schneider. I write immersive, epic, and urban fantasy for adults, as well as horror with an apocalyptic slant.
I'm Sam Rebelein, and I write fun horror for adults, like Goosebumps for grown-ups.
I am Lisa Acerbo, and I write romantasy, and my characters are quirky and offbeat.
I'm Regina Bergen. I am a cross-genre author. I cannot stick to one thing, so I write a combination of rom-com, middle grade fiction, just finished my first fantasy, and a lot of poetry and other things.
Hi, my name's Emma Tortelot. I just have one novel out so far, which is a realistic fiction, I guess is the genre. It's a mother-daughter story.
Hi, I'm Ken Priori. I'm an author of dark literature, and I'm currently writing a series of cinematic dark fantasy horror series.
My name is Kent J. Starr, and I'm an alcoholic. Oh wait, no, that's a different thing. I write horror novels for teenagers and picture books for little kids. Think like, Tim Burton and Goosebumps type stuff, but a little gorier and a little edgier.
Okay, cool. You can stay standing and you can answer the next question first.
That's cool.
There you go.
Make it easy.
So I love to know, do you have any quirky habits in your writing routine?
I'm already nocturnal in my day job, so besides being extremely nocturnal when I write, not really. I work 9 to 5, but it's PM to AM instead of, AM to PM. Because when I'm a pharmacy technician, that's my day job, I do that too. It's hard to summon an atmosphere of horror and darkness and go all that during the day when the sun's shining. Doesn't feel right.
Same question?
Same question.
Okay. I'm not sure about quirky. I start my day. I immediately drink way too much coffee, eat my breakfast, and then I grab a handful of chocolate, and I eat that with my coffee because I find that it helps with creativity.
Love
And I start writing.
Love that. I don't know if it's a habit so much as I have a full-time job. I'm a school librarian and I have 2 kids too, so I write in my car a lot. I just keep my laptop with me wherever I go, and I've spent a lot of time kind of half watching my kids' soccer games and writing in the car at the same time.
I think probably the quirkiest thing is when ideas hit me. Most of the time I'm in my car. I spend a lot of my time in my car. I will pull over wherever I am, wherever I'm going, whether it meets me late or not. I will literally pull over and jot notes down in my phone if an idea strikes me for a poem or for a story or something that a character would have said. I will pull over to the side of the road or a parking lot or whatever and get the thought down so that I don't crash my car, but also because I have to get it out of my head.
I write a lot of my stories when I'm on the treadmill. It's really boring, obviously, running, so that's like a creative time for me. I do not stop and get off the treadmill, but afterwards I write everything down, and I plan like entire scenes while I'm trying to run on the treadmill.
Well, this is kind of new. I was a really big baby about editing my last book, so I had to have a plate of cookies by my side to incentivize. I was like, every 200 words you can have a cookie, and that system broke down immediately, and I was just eating Nutter Butters as I was writing. So it's not an all the time thing, but that's been my quirky thing lately that I'm trying to break myself of.
Well, I don't know if I'd really call it quirky, more old-fashioned, I guess. I start all my stories in a notebook with a pen. That's how I don't know, I feel like it's easier. Everything's free-flowing, and it just kind of pours out that way. So.
Cool. You can keep the mic. Katie, what's your next question?
Why don't you go, because I don't have a mic.
What?
You go.
Oh, okay. I was expecting to go off of
Yeah, I know.
Makes sense,
Yeah,
so I have a favorite question that I ask all the time.
and it's what advice would you give to aspiring authors to get going?
Don't do what I did.
Yeah. Great advice.
No, I published my first book because that was my dream since I was 16 years old. And I went into it without any thought of marketing, promoting, websites, the future, whatever. I just wanted to hold my book in my hand, and that was my dream, and that was all I cared about. And I made it happen, and then suddenly I started selling, and people wanted, you know, where's book 2 and where's your website? And I'm like, oh crap, I didn't do any of that. So get yourself out there and prepare and be ready for what's coming after you actually hit that publish button.
You've gotta finish it. Don't shoot yourself in the foot and be like, well, this sucks, I can't finish this draft. You've gotta finish a full draft. You will not understand the whole story until you finish, at the very least, a real piece of shit draft. You gotta make it to the end. Even if you're using brackets to be like, cool dialogue here. Screw it, just keep going. I work at a writing center at a community college, and all the time 19-year-olds come in and they're like, well, I'm working on my novel, but I'm really stuck. And I'm like, do you have a full draft? And they every single time say no. And I'm like, well, that's your problem. You gotta finish the piece of shit draft and then take a beat and figure out what to do next, but you gotta finish it.
So rejection is part of the process. For me, it was a big part of the process. I've been rejected a lot, and I feel that really motivated me. It was actually a good thing, not when it happened. When it happened, I was sad. But looking back at it, it really motivated me to do the things I needed to do. Clean up my manuscript, apply to different places, send it to different companies. So it is going to be part of the process, and it can really be something that helps you along.
So I recently had a disappointment that kind of taught me a lesson, and I guess it would be advice that I would give someone else in my shoes, someone who can't stick to one genre, because I find it boring to stick to one genre. So I wrote my first children's book, or middle grade fiction book, because my kids asked me to write something that they could read, because nothing else I wrote was readable by them. So I wrote it without thinking it through. I used the same name that I'd been using to write everything else. And I find now that a lot of times when I reach out to schools or libraries or things like that, people are very, very excited about the book until they find out that I'm also a romance author and not merely a children's book author. So it's caused some challenges. Would I use a pen name if I could do it again? Probably. Am I going to make one now for those books? No, but learn from my mistakes.
I would say, so over the years, I've not always had as much time to write as I would like, but I find that if I write every day, even if it's only 10 minutes, I have a spreadsheet that a writing friend and I share, and we write in it. We just do a line each day and say how many minutes we wrote for, and we try to commit ourselves to 10 minutes a day. And I find if I just open up whatever I'm working on, even just for 10 minutes a day, my brain is half in my novel all day. If I'm driving, I'm the same as you, except I don't pull over. I just send myself, I don't write, I send myself voice to text memos constantly when I'm driving. But as long as I just open my manuscript once a day, I find that those ideas are kind of bubbling to the surface constantly.
Sam covered simply getting the book done, and that is very accurate. Just get it done, no matter how shitty the draft. But some other writing advice, I'm going to steal from my advisor from Bard College, Joseph O'Neill. He told me, if you can win the trust of the reader in the beginning of the story, afterwards you can get away with anything. So keep it grounded, keep it real, and once you have their trust, the story can be as outlandish as you want it to be.
The thing I wish I could go back and tell myself, and I tell everyone, is when you write your first draft, find at least 2 people and pay them to read it and catch all the typos, catch all the plot holes, catch everything. You think you're going to catch every single one of them. I promise you won't. If I could track down the self-published first edition of my very first book and burn every copy, I would against book burning. But so help me God, when I see a beat-up first edition, I'm just like, yeah, That's the one. I was like, oh, I love all the typos so that way they're canary marks. No one will go, yeah, that's what they are. That's what they are. I went from self-published to small press, and you're more likely to make that jump if you hire, and I mean hire and pay, so they actually do it, 2 people to read it and catch everything, because I know you will not do it. I thought I could do it. I was very arrogant, and I will pay for it for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Well said, sir.
Thank you, appreciate it. Oh, sorry.
That was like amazing.
Thank you.
And I gotta say, Steph and I interviewed tons of authors, and I said, can we just scratch that question, because I'm so tired of hearing the same answer. And then all of you just proved me wrong and gave a completely unique answer, and that was incredible. So accept the collaboration on Instagram. Okay, so my next question is, what would be essential to preserve if, well, it says your book, so let's say your favorite book, if you've written multiple. What would be essential to preserve if your book were ever adapted for film or television?
I have a kid who just got out of film school. He wants to make his own horror movie, but he said, oh, if I can get the money from this, if I can turn a profit, can I have the rights to Jackie and Craig? I'll let you have a ton of creative control. I said, yeah, sure. And the thing to preserve is they always say the spirit of the book, and that's what I want to preserve. I want 2 kids, hell-raising tomboy and her panic-stricken best friends who are disliked by everyone else. That's why they're friends, just fighting monsters. He straight up told me, yeah, there's 10 different kinds of monsters in the book, all that. I think with practical effects, because they're not doing CGI, he goes, we can afford 3 kinds of non-humanoids. We can do the black-eyed kids and the flesh gates, but we can do 3 kinds of non-humanoids. So I'm willing to, I changed the whole thing. I made it filmable on a couple $1 million. I made it as concise as I could. As long as it preserves the realistic friendship between the characters, then it works. That's the whole point of the book, is about the friendship of the characters, growing up, struggling. It's very, coming of age. Think The Sandlot crossed with Ghostbusters. I'm okay with cutting the monsters, changing the plot, doing all this, if it means people will feel the way they felt when they read the book. I actually don't even know if a straight, exact mini-series adaptation would even be good, because a lot of stuff wouldn't translate. So as long as people feel how they felt when they read the book, I'm fine with that. And I know if that movie gets made, I'm gonna get raked over the coals, oh, that's different, that's different, that's different. I promise you, the exact version wouldn't be good and you wouldn't like it either.
Well, my novel, The Monsters Among Us, plays heavily with themes of mental health and neurodivergence, so I feel like Hollywood would try to water down those aspects of it, despite the fact that the book tackles the beauty of neurodivergence as well as the devastation that can come with mental health issues. And, well, that would be a problem because it's so central to the plot. It would lessen the emotional impact, and it would kind of destroy my desire to place the reader into the shoes of someone with depression and anxiety to then better understand it. And yeah, so if that ever happens, read the book instead.
I have just one book. It's called No One You Know, and it's a sad book. It's about a girl who loses her best friend, and she's a teenager, and it's her relationship with her mom in the year after it happens. But I think it's a funny book too. My husband says it's funny, but I would want to preserve the sense of humor. Whenever someone picks up the book and they read the description and they're like, it sounds so sad, but I try to make it funny, and I can't read any books that don't have a sense of humor, no matter how much of a tragedy it is. I always need a book to have a sense of humor, so that would be what I would want to preserve.
Actually, similarly, so I have a rom-com series called the Small Town Dirt series. It's Dirty Ho, Dirty Latte, Dirty Laundry, and Dirty Martini is coming. And I think the witty banter, I would never want to let go of. I love the witty banter. I love that the characters play off each other so comically, and some of the topics that it touches on are kind of serious, kind of dark. Not through most of it, but book 2 gets a little bit darker than the others. But throughout all of that, I just think that underlying character back and forth kind of brings a comic relief that lets the reader get serious, but then come back and laugh about it. So I think that, and the small town charm, people have told me, oh, reading your book is like reading a Hallmark movie, except with a little bit of spice. So I think that those are the things I would try to maintain.
My book is called Death and Coffee. So obviously there would be lots of coffee, all different kinds throughout the entire production. But in addition to that, it actually follows Prudence, who's a reaper, and it starts in 1661. And her transformation, the historical decades and centuries she lives through, I think are so essential to her character and her development that I don't think you could get rid of those. You would need to kind of follow her through history to understand who she is.
I think the witty banter is a must, but I also want the stories to feel dynamic. I have started comparing my books to 90s blockbusters, and I feel like what I really mean by that is that like movies used to use the environment in a way that we don't now that we're like on, you know, sound stages and blue screens or whatever. But like the new Jurassic Park is a good example of this. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but like you're meeting terrible. You're meeting the characters, and it's like this. Here's the team, you know, and they're all sitting down and doing nothing as you're meeting each one. And so I immediately went back and rewatched The Lost World, which came out in '97, and it's like you're meeting Richard Schiff, you're meeting Goldblum. They're walking through this warehouse where like people are building shit and constructing things, and things are moving. And it's these long takes of like all these moving parts, and we're losing that a little bit in film. We're losing the choreography of being in a space. And so if nothing else, I want the films of my books someday to have that feel, that they're choreographed, they're dynamic, and it feels like you're in that space with them instead of just in a box.
Most of my books have a lot of action, whether it be sword battles, monsters, whatever it is. But some of my favorite scenes are the quiet character moments, the character development, the interaction, whether it be between two friends, lovers, or the hero and the villain. Those are some of my favorite scenes, just those quiet moments where you bring those, the characters forward and the relationships evolve and you get to know them more than you do on a battlefield. So I would definitely want to see those stay as much as possible.
Love all of that. Okay, so if you guys aren't super busy writing all the time, are you reading something? What are you reading, and do you love it?
At the moment, I'm not reading anything because I just, my next release is with my proofreader, so that's about to be out soon. And I started drafting
We're reading our own books.
Yes, I just started drafting 2 new stories, and when I draft, I really don't read other books. Usually once I get to the point where I'm revising and stuff, I can, but when I'm drafting, I am all in with the stories in my head, and I can't focus on anything else.
Okay, option B, what are you dying to read?
Oh, she's not letting you out of it.
My sister gave me Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies for Christmas, so that's on my nightstand.
Nice. That's a good answer. I got an ARC, humble brag, of Wood Feast by Meg Ripley, which is the second book in a duology. The first one is Necrology, and both of these are published by Creature Publishing, which does horror by women exclusively. And their Necrology and Wood Feast are like alternate history witchy books, and they're really cool. They're sort of like Lord of the Rings in that every single piece has its own little magic lore based around it. So everything you meet, they're like, oh, that's the whatever, and it does this. And you're like, cool, great, I'm along for the ride. So that's really fun. And I feel like I'm in the middle of some other stuff too, but I'm blanking on what it is. So I would highly recommend Necrology and Wood Feast by Meg Ripley.
I'm reading Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. So it's nonfiction, which is not my usual genre, but I loved this book, and I love it because it's not just about a disease, it's about what it means to be human and how things like tuberculosis bring out the best and the worst in people. And that's a theme that kind of runs through a lot of my stories.
I'm a terrible modern day reader because I I am a freelance editor, and basically every book that I read is not a book that is out right now because I don't have time to read for fun and read for editing, and editing pays me. So what I'm reading right now is a sort of magical academic, really cool book that I love it, but I can't really talk about it. But it's by an indie author. It's by an indie author with a pen name, which I cannot reveal either. So I have nothing to say here, but I do a lot of reading, but none of it is books that are on the shelves. And when people ask me to like talk about modern books that are out, that are new releases, I draw blanks and I look like a complete idiot because I have nothing.
Okay, I'm the opposite because I'm a school librarian. So I read for my job, and I'm also in 2 book clubs, and I have a pretty long commute to work, so I do a lot of audiobooks. So I've always got multiple books going on. I'm reading Michael Pollan's new book. He's got a new book about consciousness that's called A World of Ears. I love it. So I read anything. He's my favorite science writer, so I'm reading that. I just finished God of the Woods, which is really good. And my next up to read is The Correspondence by Virginia Evans, which I don't know if anyone's heard of that. It was a book that basically the women of Book Talk and Bookstagram decided they were going to make it a hit, and they did. I love that. That makes me so happy.
I'm currently reading Carl Uwe Knausgaard's Spring Seasons Quartet, rather. Spring was the one I just finished. 3rd and 4th. It's a really beautiful nonfiction series where it's essentially him writing a love letter to his unborn daughter, which about the most mundane things in the world: dirt, tile floors. And he talks about it in ways that are super mundane, but then it explodes in quick succession into beautiful metaphor. And I also find it just fitting that I'm reading it right now because the sequel to my debut novel takes the main character from the first book and puts him into a situation where he is now juggling fatherhood. So it feels very fitting.
Did you want that recording because it just stopped?
It just stopped? Yep, I definitely want that.
Thank you.
Thank
Your
you.
phone just died.
We're,
Phone call?
Oh, yeah, you're
oh, how rude.
Well, it's not recording.
Did it just
No.
stop?
I was gonna say, if anyone saw me texting, my friend was just asking about the prices of my book upstairs. That's the only reason I
Oh,
texted
you're
back.
good.
I'm very engaged in this, I swear.
It's probably my kid.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But
continue.
so, currently, I cycle through 3 books at a time, usually for reasons explicable to no one, including myself. There's a spin-off of my book series that you can read for free online, composed of the 180,000 words that I cut out of the first 3 books. And one of the characters is a sociopath, so I started reading this book, The Mask of Sanity, which is a nonfiction. It's the first nonfiction book on what sociopathy was, like it's putting forward the hypothesis that such a condition exists. And it's an interesting throwback and like a really, deep dive into a bunch of case studies. It's very, very strange. And then on the fiction front, there's a guy, he's also indie like me, Matt Bartlett, and he wrote a couple of books about this town in Massachusetts. One of them was called The Witch Cult in Western Massachusetts, where a guy drives through and he gets these weird radio signals telling him about things, like speaking the names of his relatives, all kinds of things. And after driving through, the signals keep following him, the broadcasts keep following him, no matter where he goes. He tries to listen to a podcast, they start talking about, his sister who died when he was a kid. So he decides he has to go back to the town and see what's going on. They're a series of short stories, but they're really weird and awful, and awful in a good way, awful and surreal and creepy and messed up and all that good stuff.
Awful in the best way.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. You sold me on that.
I met him a couple of times, he's a cool guy.
So the last question for me is, what do you hope that your readers take away from your book and or books? I know that's a really tough question to answer, but what is it that you want people to take away from you as an author?
I want them to keep taking away what they already take away. I remember very distinctly that, and this is gonna sound really dramatic, but I met, so I have what they used to call Asperger's, it's the high functioning autism. And at one of the Moon, Serpent, and Bone things, which they used to have here when they had them, I met this 19-year-old girl who was a huge fan of my books. She had one of those beat up first editions, I mean, I'm glad she liked it, but she was clearly a little more, like, and I mean this in no negative way, but more on the spectrum than I am. She had, like, you know, some tics and stuff. She was there with all her friends. And I mean, I didn't judge her at all. I was like, I totally get how you're feeling. You're anxious, all that. And she wanted her first edition of Jackie and Craig signed. It was like beat up and ruined. It had obviously seen better days. And I signed it, and she actually said to me, it's like, I love Amy being the autistic girl in the book. She goes, oh, I love Amy so much because she's, you know, very realistic and relatable, and she's not like, you know, oh, super endearingly quirky and all that. She's legitimately got struggles. And she goes, you know, I feel like you present us, meaning autistic people, as some buddies and not some things. And I remember I had my friend Miles with me at the time, and he's not the best at focusing, great guy, but not much of an attention span. I said, hey, can you watch the table for a minute? And then I think I went in the bathroom and just like teared up for a little bit. So I want them to keep taking away that no matter how strange you feel or how weird you are, how off-putting or how whatever, there's other people who can and have felt the same way. And when you express yourself creatively, those same people will find your stuff and feel less alone. And that's what I want people to keep taking away. And my picture book is the same thing. A gay kid in Texas told me, you know, oh, I'm in the closet, I can't really be myself, but I feel like, you know, you understand how it feels like. I mean, yeah, I've never been in your position, but yeah, no, I totally get not really being able to be yourself, you know, and having to hide so much of who you are. So I want them to keep taking that away if I can. And if I, you know, never see a movie, never see any millions of dollars, it still would be worth it, you know, for that. Sorry if that was long-winded.
I wrote my debut, The Monsters Among Us, for a very specific purpose. The main character is a young man who's struggling with bipolar disorder, something I share with him. And the point, what I wanted to accomplish with it was to place the reader into the shoes, into the headspace of that struggling young man. So they could have relatability, they could have some representation in literature, which there is very little of, minus the big favorites like Sylvia Plath's and Bell Jar. And I also wanted to make people who don't understand life with neurodivergence, I want them to understand. But ultimately, the story is about this character finding out that his whole upbringing was a facade, and he breaks through that illusion, broken in pieces, and he has to learn how to piece the semblance of his life back together, and even perhaps transmute his pain into strength. And I want readers to understand and learn that that is indeed possible, even with something like bipolar depression, anxiety, what have you.
I love both those answers, and that's my favorite part about being a school librarian is when kids will come in the library and like one girl just like pointed at a picture book and she's like, oh, that's like my hair looks like that, or like that's me, you know, and it's just like that's so yeah, I love that answer. So my book is a mother-daughter story, and the mother-daughter take it in turns telling the story every other chapter. And it was sort of this idea that you can't protect your kids from this idea that the world will hurt them. But ultimately it's a story of hope, and I think that's what I would want readers to take away from it. It's just like the hope and the love in it.
So for this question, I'm gonna jump to my middle grade fiction book, Paisley Untethered. So on the surface, this book is a middle grade children's fiction book. It's a story about a dog. It's a story about a year in a dog's life written from the perspective of a dog. There's funny one-liners in there, there's jokes, it's parts of it are hilarious. It starts sad and gets happy because I wasn't going to write another sad dog book to add to the list of a million other sad dog books. But essentially, if you read this with your child as an adult, reading with your child, or even just read it as an adult, there are all these underlying themes that start to surface, from PTSD, coping with PTSD, coping with anxiety, coping with all sorts of issues that this dog is facing from being abandoned essentially during a blizzard and basically left for dead. And then as this dog's life starts to change and starts to improve, it's just, I want people to read it and see that some of these obstacles can be overcome and that there is hope, and that just happiness is possible even after all of the trauma. So I think that's what I want people to take from Paisley. The sequel to Paisley Untethered, Paisley Protector, comes out next week. So.
Oh. So I really do believe that reading meets you where you are in your life. When I wrote the book, it was more to entertain. My characters are quirky. There's a lot of kind of campy horror going on. But I wanted it to start conversations. So I'm not sure that I had an intentional, there's lots of themes going through it, like what it means to be human, how important is love, but I really think that I wanted to start conversations with the book. Because it travels so far in history from the 1600s to today, I wanted people to just talk to one another, to kind of start different conversations about things that are going on in the world or things that have happened in the past. So rather than a specific theme, I wanted people to pick out what was meaningful and relevant to them.
I feel like I don't have anything specific to add, really. I agree with all of this. What if I said the exact opposite? It was like, I want my books to make you feel like you are alone. Your voice doesn't matter.
Non-conformist.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I agree. Like I said, I agree with everything that's been said. I want my books to, make you feel like your voice does matter, no matter who you are or where you are in life. A few people have told me that my books got them back into reading after very long slumps, which is like the biggest compliment ever. So I don't know. I just want people to find joy and comfort in my worlds. It's like it's the stuff that's in your head, and you're putting it out there, and you're like, come into my brain with me, hang out, And so you want that to be a space of uplifting energy and joy in some way.
I write to make people feel. I try to take them on a roller coaster of emotions, and I write characters that are very real and very flawed, and they have to earn their hero stripes, and they have to go through a lot to get where they are by the end of the book. And I just want people to be able to, I guess it's kind of like what other people have said, to see themselves in these very real people and the struggles they go through and the wins and the losses, and to just feel. I want them to cry. I want them to, I've had people tell me they slam the book into the armchair and they hate me, and then they pick it up and they read the next chapter, and then I made them cry and laugh, and that's all I really want. I want to give people an adventure and a roller coaster of emotions. I want to take them from the highs to the lows, and that's what I hope they take away.
Amen.
These are all just such magical responses.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, you guys are all coming on our podcast.
I want to read all your books. So the last question that I have for you is just, where do you typically draw your inspiration from for your characters, your books, everything?
I usually start with a character in mind. I usually have something. My very first novel that I published, I wanted a very flawed anti-hero, and I wanted his greatest strength to be his greatest weakness. So he's a very powerful magic user, but he's also addicted to it, and it harms other people, and so a lot of things come from that that he doesn't mean to happen. I usually have a singular idea, and I build from there, and then usually it's revolving around the characters. And once I flesh out the characters so much, then the story kind of comes from them. Like, I built the magic system from him, and then the other characters, the side characters, kind of came from him. And once you know them so well, the rest just kind of falls into place. That's most of it. Occasionally, I wrote one story based on this stone I had on my bookshelf. I'm like, what can I do with that? My friend had a dream about zombies. I'm like, ooh, I like that dream. So I took a couple parts from there and named the main character after her. Another one came from a conversation I had with my son. I don't know where they just kind of, something just clicks and pops in my head, like, oh, I could use that. And then it just kind of goes from there.
Yeah, I do really believe that as a writer or a creative in some way, you just have that extra antenna that stuff pings to. So ideas just come from around, and you're seeing other worlds that you can make possible in this world and things like that. When I was really starting to knuckle down and focus on writing professionally, I was writing stories that were based on things that I was seeing driving around the Hudson Valley. So like saw just like a bathtub by the side of the road, and I was like, who's the guy who sits in that bathtub every day? Why does he eat kids? And as a horror writer, you know.
So you were psyched to come into this dungeon space, like you knew coming.
Yeah. There were so many twists and turns just to get down here. They're done. But as a horror writer too, most of my stories come from my own scaredy catness. I was a really anxious kid and just have like the anxiety spiral all the time. And so most of my, Stephen King talks about the like what if. All of his stories are like, what if this happened? But for me, like I'm having those stories all the time anyway. So I'm like, what if someone tried to kill me right now? What would that be like? What would it, blah, blah, blah. Right? And so a lot of the, like my most recent novel, Galloway's Gospel, was just like, what if we were taken over by a cult? Which is, kind of happening. Kind of, what am I talking about? So that's where a lot of it, like I was working on a short story on a plane about a guy who gets stuck in traffic, and then I was just like, okay, well what's the, keeps getting worse, and like by the end of the story he was like stuck in his car and the heat was blasting and he couldn't get out, and I was on the plane and there was a little turbulence and I was like, I have to put this away. I'm freaking myself out. So that to me is the good stuff, when you're having that catharsis and getting that stuff out.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, a lot of my inspiration comes from personal experiences, personal history, also family, friends. I have no problem embarrassing them. I tell them not to read my books because they'll find themselves in there somewhere. Some of the crazy conversations with my mom, or like the personal conversations with my daughter, yep, it's all in there. In addition, I kind of also go look for very weird, quirky situations, like checking out the news or finding a town that just sounds like it couldn't exist, but it does. So I'll seek out like weird things that have happened or weird places, and that usually sparks my imagination.
So I definitely agree. Real life, I can pinpoint for almost every single one of my books, I can pinpoint either a moment or an experience that led to that book being created. So Paisley Untethered, my child asked me to write a book that they could read. And then almost immediately after that, something brought back a memory of my first dog, which my dad found tied to a fence in a blizzard, and from there it was just boom, story. And it went completely on a different trajectory than that actual experience, but that was the catalyst for the story. My first book ever, which was the Small Town Dirt series, book 1, Dirty Ho. I was recently divorced. I was into gardening, and then it just went from there. That was that people are like, is this like autobiographical? I'm like, no, not at all. I mean, there are things, but no.
But he's
like,
6'2" is.
Yeah. Okay, so But He's 6'2" is my essay compilation of dating in this day and age, so that one's fun, and that is actually nonfiction. But aside from that, every other book I can literally pinpoint a moment that it hit my brain as, oh, I need to write this down, I need to write this into a story. Right now, there's recently, some of you may remember, just a couple weeks ago, there was an earthquake and they found the base to be Sleepy Hollow. Triggered immediately an idea, so I'm doing a retelling of the Headless Horseman that takes place in modern day, and it is based after an earthquake in Sleepy Hollow, and it just snowballs from there. But inspiration can be found anywhere in anything if you're looking for it, basically, is my thought.
Yeah, I'm definitely a magpie too. I'm constantly stealing stories and anecdotes and quotes. And then once it's in my book, I completely forget whose story it was. So there's like a little anecdote that's in the very first chapter of my book. And both my husband and my best friend are convinced that they shared the story with me. And it's like a really personal story about an old man and the way he sorts his tools in his shed, and it's really weird that they both think they gave me that story. So yeah, I take things. One of them must have done that. Yeah. But yeah, I take a lot of stuff from real life and then kind of, fictionalize it. I like the story in my book about the girl whose best friend died. Like, it didn't happen to my daughter, but her best friend moved away, which feels like death to a girl who's 14. So I kind of took that and spun it out and made it bigger. So yeah.
For me, it entirely depends on the story. Like my debut, like I mentioned with The Monsters Among Us, yes, a lot of what Seth deals with, especially in the beginning, was taken from my own childhood, but greatly, exaggerated for the point of fiction. However, I also recently wrote a short story involving a soldier in 1950s coming home from World War II, dealing with PTSD. Couldn't be more of a stranger to me, but so I'm not really sure where the ideas come from, aside from I always begin at a point of wanting to make political, social commentary, and I use that as an anchor, a narrative anchor for weaving the story around.
For me, it's usually a combination of things I did experience way exaggerated, and then things I'm interested in that I just can't get enough of. One example is like kids to this day, teenagers who read my book, Jackie and Craig, which is set in 1997, will be like, so did you do all that shoplifting when you were a kid? It was like, I never put beers in the 12-pack soda box. I didn't swap the beers for sodas. But I knew kids that did. I just stole sodas. I was not completely evil. And I was like, you could do that. I'm always stressing, you could do that in the day when they didn't have security cameras and there was a local place. You could do that and get away with it. Don't try that now. You will get caught and get in serious trouble. Please don't commit crimes. You go like, oh yeah, I read that book and told me. But is that like Craig, the kid in my book, he's like 13 and he's a nervous wreck. I didn't have anxiety that severe when I was 13, but I have definitely always been a nervous wreck to some degree or another. It just got worse as I got older. And piggybacking off of that, I also, as a kid, was obsessed with cryptozoology, which is, the study of hypothetical animals. So like, if you saw something weird killing your goats and you don't know what it was, you build an animal to explain it, like the chupacabra. And the crypto.
What do you mean? That's real. I'm just kidding.
Could be. I have a piece of fan mail from someone who insists up and down they saw a real chupacabra in Puerto Rico. But when I was growing up, see, the word changed. Nowadays, a cryptid is like any vague monster you see. When I was a kid, it meant an animal, a hypothetical animal that could be captured, classified, and killed. So, for example, my idea was that I came up with as a kid and put in my book is, chupacabras are giant flightless bats from some alternate timeline where bats are the dominant form of mammalian life, and they like blood and soft organs because they have mineral deficiencies. It's like science fictional. It's like a real ordinary animal, and then in the book they get violently murdered. Jackie cuts one's throat, Craig impales one to show they're just animals. They're not like magical or supernatural, and it's reintroduced a whole new group of kids to what cryptozoology was supposed to be. I talk about it like it's a real science that got ruined, but so like that, like there aren't really enough books on that kind of cryptozoology because it was never a real science to begin with and it doesn't exist anymore. So like I wanted to reintroduce that, and then I took stuff from when I was growing up and just exaggerated it. Like I didn't start any fires, I didn't do a ton of graffiti, but it makes for a more interesting story if they're doing that. Don't try this at home, kids. I accept no liability. Keep going, right?
Nope, that was it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that was incredible. And I think you're gonna be fine with the disclaimers. I don't know if you've ever read the dark romance novel. It's like 25 pages long in the beginning, so I think you're good. But this was incredible. Thank you all for coming, everyone from listening. I don't know if you all have Instagram handles, but for our viewers, which we will be posting this on our site, we will link everyone's contact information. You should buy their books because they're obviously amazing. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.